one offshoot of having the oneg yesterday, where so many people brought so much stuff. We generally bring that great big pot of soup like we did yesterday, the taco soup, and generally speaking, it's pretty well gone by the time, But there was so much food there that it didn't look like hardly any of the soup that we brought was eaten. So we gave Cynthia some, and then we brought home she said, that's enough, we can't eat that much. So we brought it home. I'm going to be eating that taco soup until probably at least the middle of the summer.
Well, I had a full bowl of it.
It's better, Ed, if you put jalapenos in it. She wouldn't let me put my death dust in it for general consumption.
Oh man,
that would not be good. So
that would have been awesome.
So I've got, I think, 18 jalapeno plants started, maybe more. And so
Hey, you're singing my song, buddy.
Yeah, I love jalapenos.
We'll end up I'll probably end up more than I can use again, and so I'll be making up death dust. So now I also got to put in a store of half pint. Check my half pint jars. See how many half pint jars I got.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
All right, so I think we're just about, that one's ready to go. And tell you what, it gets this thing, it gets so many many different buttons that I gotta push on this thing to get everybody situated here. It takes 10 minutes to get them all done, so that's all right. We're getting it. Okay. Yeah, I think we're all set. Let me go ahead and yeah, that's everything, I think. I'm going to go ahead and mute everyone so that I don't get any feedback here, and that if you have anything to say, you know the rules, just unmute yourself and say away. Nobody seems to have a problem with that, so that's good. Okay. So I want to welcome everyone back into the Isaiah study, 15 and 16 tonight, and we'll be studying the oracle concerning Moab. And let's begin with the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctifies us with his commandments and commands us to engross ourselves in the words of Torah. Okay, now, like I said, we're looking at the chapters 15 and 16 of Isaiah, which is the section of scripture that discusses the future judgment against Moab, and we see that right in this area here. And we just finished off last week with the Philistines and what their judgment would be, and then this week we're doing Moab, and next week it'll be Egypt. And so and as far as a time frame goes, we will be right between 710 and 701. It just depends on what scholar you're following, because they all kind of measure it a little bit differently, and so that's where we are in our time frame, and I've got that here. Probably I could have moved it over just a little bit, but anyway, that's kind of where we are today, and I'll take a look at it a little bit, try to hone in on it next week a little bit. Okay, Carmen, you had a comment?
Yes, Moab is where Ruth is from, right? Is
Yes,
Ruth.
she was a Moabitess,
Yeah,
and
okay.
yeah, she was from Moab. Exactly right, and I'll mention that in a little bit too, as to the idea of the emigration and immigration. That's, the immigration with an I and immigration with an E between the two countries, and we'll talk about that in a minute. All right, so so here we are now in this part here of Moab. They're going to they're basically going to be destroyed, and their population will be decimated, and so that's that slide. And I wanted to show you where Moab is now. A lot of this is basically Jordan today. This area here is the country of part of the country of Jordan, and these these people here, the Moabites, are actually they are cousins to the Israelites. You remember that the beginning of the Moabite world there came from where Lot was, he was in Sodom, and he had to leave because it was going to be destroyed. And then his wife turned back, and she turned into a pillar of salt. And so then the two daughters seduced him, and and both of them conceived. And one of the daughters gave birth to a son, and she named him Moab, which meant a son of my father, or coming from my father, and so then the other son, and he was the beginning of the Moabites, and then the other one was Ammon, or Ammon, and I forget right off the top of my head what that one meant. But anyway, that was the beginning. So both Ammon and Moab were products of an incestual relationship. And so I think in the mind of the Israelites, that was always kind of a sore spot in their relationship with the Moabites. And then also you remember that it was the Moabites who, after when the Israelites were going wandering around, and Balaam was wanting to curse the Israelites, and he couldn't do it, and they said, well, okay, but I know how to do that. And that's so you get the daughters of Moab to try to seduce the sons of Israel, and then that could turn them away from the God of Israel, and that's exactly what they did. And so then there's some by stories of that. Famous one we'll be doing in our parshas in the next week or two is the story of Pinchas, or Phineas as in the English Bible, but Pinchas, who he executed a couple of people who were well, they were, just to put it unnicely. They were fornicating right in front of the tent, the tabernacle, and just kind of defying the word of God. And so when they went on to their own tent to continue with their amorous activities, he went in with the spear and killed them both. And so there's some history here behind Moab. And so for the most part, Israel and Moab were not like sworn enemies like, say, the Philistines or the Edomites or some of the others that were around. So for the most part, they had a good relationship, or at least kind of a laissez-faire relationship. And there was the chance that people could move back and forth in and out of Moab and Israel, depending on like we talked about Ruth and her mother-in-law Naomi, how they had moved. The family had moved from Israel into Moab because there was a famine in Israel, but not over in Moab. And then the two Naomi's two sons died and left her with two daughters-in-law, and they went back then to or Ruth then followed Naomi back into Israel, and you came up with the very famous saying of your people will be my people, your God will be my God. Wherever you go, I'm going to go too. And and so that's when Naomi said, "Oy vey, another daughter-in-law." No, that's not what she said. But anyway, they could move back and forth into Israel and Moab with relative ease. They weren't always at war, but they did have some border disputes, and that was over that northern part of Moab around Dibon, because Israel claimed that, and of course Moabites didn't. Okay, and Joseph said, "Don't forget Balak and Balaam, and the talking donkey." Yeah, that was the who I was talking about, where that they were supposed to curse Israel, and the king of Moab was terrified that they were going to destroy him like they did the Amalekites, and so that's when the plan was hatched. Well, we'll get the Moabite women to defeat the Israeli men, because I guess well, for whatever reason, the Israeli men were sort of suckers for the Moabite women. So anyway, so there's a good bit of history there. Okay, and let's go on. And I wanted to also, we're going to be talking about me and my maps. Okay, got to have maps. So here's the area of Moab. It goes. Here's the Ammon River here. That's the northern boundary of Moab, and you'll see here this area was an area claimed by Reuben, the tribe of Reuben, and that's why there's always some because you see Dibon here is north of the Ammon River, and so Israel said, well, the border is the Ammon River, so the city of Dibon and Aroer and all that belongs, that's our territory. And Moab says, no, it's not, because our territory goes all the way up here to this, up around the top of the Dead Sea, and to include Heshbon and so forth. So They were the Moabites were a little bit how you would say they were a little bit aggressive in what they thought was going to be what should be their territory. But anyway, there was always a little bit of push and shove there, and eventually Moab and Israel did come to blows over that territory. But by this time that we're talking about now, in this time frame, this whole area, it was a moot point, because Israel, the northern 10 tribes, had been defeated and by Assyria. That happened in 722 BCE, and so now we're talking somewhere in I don't know. I got it written down here. Okay, there's something more stuff I want to talk about, but it was this prophecy here was a little bit later on, and I can put it. Let's see, 715 to 711 BCE. All right, so I wanted to also point out to you that there was a back in, I think it's 1886 or something like that, a German missionary found this, they called it the Mesha Stele, and it was a tablet that was that talked about how that the king of Moab had defeated one of the Israelite kings, son of Omri, who was probably Jehoram. And so anyway, it catalogs this victory. And if you look at the over here on the left hand side, you can look at these the inscriptions here. Well, guess what that looks like? That looks like Paleo Hebrew. So the Moabites and the early Moabites and the early Hebrews, the early Israelites, their language was very, very similar. They spoke almost a common language, as you can see in these carvings. That is Paleo Hebrew, if ever there was one. And so and I don't know if you can read this, I can read it to you. It says, in boasting of his victories, Mesha, the king of Moab, gives glory to Chemosh, the chief god of the Moabites, and describes his looting of the temple vessels of Judah. The stele contains the earliest known reference to the name. Okay, they use Yahweh. We don't say that in Jewish circles. The Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, the four-letter word of God, name of God, the earliest known reference to the name outside of the Old Testament. Now, the stele supports the biblical account of events during Jehoram's reign of Israel, and that's in 2 Kings 3:21 to 27. And it describes the king of Moab offering his son as a sacrifice, after which great wrath came upon Israel. On this stele, Mesha credits his god Chemosh as conquering his enemies. Now, that was a common thing back in the day, that if you went to battle with your enemy and you prevailed, then that must mean that your god was bigger than their god. And so anyway, I thought that was kind of interesting, the Mesha stele. And here's some pictures of the plains of Moab. This area might have actually been greener and more productive back in those days, but it was a great place for grazing sheep and goats, and it was a highly regarded place, and even today has a good bit of agriculture in it. All right, so now this you've heard me talk about something being a chiasm or chiastic structure, and these two verses here are two chapters here are arranged in a pretty much of a chiastic structure, where you got A prime, that Moab's ruin. That's in chapter 15, verse 1. And then verses 2 and 4, you talk about Moab's grief expressed. And then in 5 through 9, you got Adonai's grief over Moab. The Lord grieved over them because he knew what was going to happen. And then through Isaiah grieved. Because, like I said, these were not mortal enemies. These were their cousins. And so, and then D prime, Moab's plea for shelter, that in the first verse of chapter 16. And then in just a verse and a half, it talks about the security in Zion. And that's the center point of the chiasm. And then you start working your way back and to D2 there, and that is Moab's pride, where the Bible talks about that. And then it kind of jumps. It doesn't go exactly in a classic chiasm, but you see B2 here. It says Moab's grief is explained, and so you got Moab's grief here is B2, and then Moab's grief up here is B1. Then it jumps back down to C2. Whoops, go back. C2, where it's the Lord's grief over Moab. It's expressed again in these verses at 9 to 12, and then finally it works its way all the way back to what it was talking about up here: Moab's certain ruin. Well, now it's Moab's imminent ruin in these verses. So anyway, that's a very common structure in the Hebrew scriptures. It's called a chiasm or a chiastic structure, and so it's very common in their writings. Not so much in English, but it was in ancient Hebrew. All right. Any comments or questions so far? Did I miss anything in the description of Moab? I know we got some pretty good scholars in the class, so speak up if you can think of anything. All right, going ahead. Chapter 15, verse 1, the burden of Moab. For in the night that Ar is devastated, Moab is ruined. For in the night that Kir is devastated, Moab is ruined. Now, this was, like I'd said, it happens between 715 and 711 BCE, and there are others that make it a little bit earlier, and some that make it a little bit later, because some of the references in the scriptures are not exactly, they're not crystal clear, let's say. Okay. And so I've talked about it. I got ahead of my notes. Moab and Judah, or Israel, generally were on friendly terms. They were not like the Philistines or, the Ammonites or the Edomites, especially, who were sworn enemies. But they generally got back and forth. They were friendly, and they could immigrate back and forth. That was fairly easy, not a big deal. Of course, there weren't any border patrols back then either, so their language was almost identical, so that made moving back and forth easier. And where it talks about the destruction, for in the night Ar is devastated, and in the night Kir is devastated, doesn't mean that all happened like in a 12-hour period at night. It just it points to the fact that it was going to be relatively swift, that Moab was not going to be able to put up much of a defense at all. And so what I think what they're really talking about is that there's really no security outside the Lord. Okay, Okay, Isaiah. Yep, exactly. Isaiah 16:4b and 5. The security of Zion has eschatological overtones and points to the second coming of Yeshua. That's right. Verse 5, and I mentioned that later on, but you're exactly right on that. That Isaiah 16:5 is a messianic reference, a marker, a messianic marker that we need to remember. Okay, verse 2-4 says, he has gone up to the shrine to Dibon, to the high places to weep. Moab wails over Nebo and Medeba. Every head is bald, every beard shaven. In their streets they wear sackcloth, on their roof, on their housetops, and in their plazas. Everyone wails, weeping profusely. Heshbon and Eliela cry out. Their voice is heard as far as Jahaz. And therefore the soldiers of Moab cry aloud. His soul faints within him. All right, so what we have here is just a picture of how the widespread nature of this lamentation is going to cover the whole land. It will be as if the death of the nation had occurred, and this morning it's going to take place everywhere in the land. Even the warriors are going to be totally demoralized, shaken to their core, and says they would go up into the house, and that may be kind of a cryptic phrase that meant it's possibly a parallel to high places, going up into the house, into the high places, and refers to the temple of Chemosh, which was in Dibon. And we see other language like that in other Middle Eastern writings, in the Sumerian, I think it's called Lamentation over the Destruction of Ur. It was an ancient writing that they talk about the idea of going up into the house or onto the house, and that was going into the temple of the local deity. So, and Dibon is located about 3 miles north of the Arnon River, and so it was in the land, like I'd explained, that Israel claimed, but it was Mesha, the king of Moab. It was his city, his native city, and so basically their government ran from there. That was their main. That was kind of their capital back in those days, and so they had a high place. They had a temple there to the god Chemosh. And so part of the lament here at the sanctuary was that their God was unable to deliver the people of Moab. They were roundly defeated later on by the Assyrians. So Mount Nebo is the great mountain at the north end of the Dead Sea, and this is where, if you remember right, Moses went up there and God showed him a kind of a supernatural vision of all of the land that would eventually, that it was promised to Israel, all the way from they call the river of Egypt, which is the Wadi al something. Basically, it's where the southern border of Israel is today in the Negev. And then all the way up, says out to the Euphrates. Well, of course, you're not going to be able to see the Euphrates River from Mount Nebo, but anyway, that's that mountain, and I can probably show you. Mount Nebo is this area right in here, okay? and there is a city, Nebo, and Nebo, however they would have pronounced it, I don't know. But anyway, that's about where we're talking about, that Moses was able to see supernaturally all the way to the Mediterranean, and all the way up to the Euphrates, and then down to the southern portion. He could not have seen it other than it would have been a vision given to him by God. And so, all right. And so now they were talking in these verses here about every head was shaved and every beard was cut off. Back in those days, the idea of a beard was that was a kind of a manhood thing. And if a conqueror wanted to humiliate the prisoners of war, the prisoners that he took, they would take and they would shave one half of their beard off, just one half. And that was kind of a humiliation, because the person can't go around with just one half of a beard. And so then they would have to cut the other side of their beard off and then start growing it out again. But cutting the beard off and shaving your head was a sign of extreme mourning. And so that's where they're talking about, that's what they're talking about here in these verses, the idea of the extent of mourning that would be going on in all throughout the land of Moab. And so, and they named the cities that, Heshbon and Elealeh, and, I showed you those earlier. And so it just went from there all the way down to the bottom. And the idea that this mourning and this devastation was so great that the soldiers, the stout-hearted men, would look at this and all the fight was gone out of them. They had nothing left. All their reserve was gone, and they just didn't have a solution. They were, totally wiped out, as it were. So, okay, let's go ahead then. Verse 5 and 6, my heart cries out for Moab. Her fugitives are as far as Zoar, as a 3-year-old heifer by the ascent of Luhith. They go up with weeping, for on the way to Horonaim they raise a cry of distress. The waters of Nimrim are desolate. The grass is withered away. The new grass withers. There is nothing green. All right, this is a picture. The Lord expressed his grief over Moab's coming judgment through the mouth of the prophet. Okay, this is the Lord speaking here. Adonai is speaking through Isaiah, and Isaiah took up God's words in his own mouth, and he represented God's thoughts and words by using the first person singular. That gets technical Hebrew, but anyway, that was the thought of it. The Moabite refugees then would move from place to place, trying to find some kind of security. Their movement would be generally south, so we can maybe surmise from that then that their enemy was coming in from the north, and so they were trying to get away from the enemy by moving in a southerly direction. And you will know, many of you may realize that down at the more of the southern end of Moab, you would have the city of Petra. It was on the King's Highway, major trading city. And I'm not sure that was ever a real, just looking at it, I don't know how it could have been defended all that well, because it's down in a canyon, and all the enemy would have had to do is go to the top of the mountains around this canyon, and they could shoot their arrows or whatever at anybody that just dared to walk out of any one of the cliff dwellings, because the whole thing of Petra was it was dug into the sandstone cliffs of that canyon. Pretty impressive place. It was just awesome. But anyway, they talk about the waters of Nimrim. Well, that was a famous oasis, and that the press of the refugees, the mass number of the refugees would be coming in there, and basically they would overwhelm the ability of that spring, that oasis, to support them, and so the waters would dry up. The grass, of course, with the people's flocks and everything, it was gone, and it would be any new grass would be eaten up, and so it was just a picture of devastation throughout all of Moab here. So, comments or questions before we go on? Okay, verse 7 through 9. Then therefore the riches that they had gotten, whatever they have stored, they carry over the Wadi of Willows. For the cry has gone around the borders of Moab, the wailing to Eglaim, and the wailing of Beer Elim. For the waters of Dimon are full of blood, but I will bring on Dimon even more, a lion for those escaping from Moab, and for those remaining in the land. So what we have here is talk about the riches that these people would, and they're like all of us. We store up things, and if you're a prepper, some people will put away food, and they'll buy these buckets of freeze-dried stuff, and or get a bunch of MREs, and they'll have those, and actually you can do that today. Back in our day, when we first went into the service back in the 60s, they didn't have MREs, they had C rations. And that's all. I mean, yeah, you could eat C rations so that you didn't starve, but I don't think you'd ever get fat on C rations. But these MREs that we have today, they're so high calorie. I think you could actually get a little porky if you ate that. But people will store up things. Well, the Moabites were the same way. They had stored up things. They accumulated things, and they would have some gold and silver maybe stashed away for that proverbial rainy day. And so it just kind of talks to, in our human attempt to take care of ourselves, we stock up and enough of it in advance so that we'll never be wanting. And unfortunately, it doesn't always work out that way. And just yesterday, my daughter was saying that she talked to an old man, and I had to tell her to watch how she classified an old man. But she said this old man was telling her that he had to go back to work. He was working at Lowe's because he had outlived his money, and so he had to. He had nothing. His Social Security wasn't enough to keep him going, so he had to go back to work. And I see, that happens to a lot of people nowadays, that they outlive their savings. They save all their life, and like the Moabites. Then when things go south on them, then they eat into all of their savings, and they just cannot keep going. And so that's that's an unfortunate thing. We can have all of this wealth, or relative wealth. I mean, a lot of us, we're never going to have wealth, big bunches of money, but it's just not going to keep you. I mean, even my wife and I, we have our little garden out here, and we can things and so forth. But other than lasting a few months, that's not going to last us for years and years, if that's what we had to live on. And so that's where the Moabites were in this case. They have the Wadi of Willows, was possibly the Zered River. That's way down on the south. That's the southern border of Moab. And today we would call it the Wadi El Hesa. And but that was where they were heading to, trying to get away from the Assyrians. And just the way that they describe this, the cries of the fugitives, the refugees, they would fill the land from one end to the other, from border to border, and they would reach all the way down to the south of Moab, and maybe they were trying to go to the north, but they couldn't get away, and so that the cries of the inhabitants was pretty much universal. And so verse 9 then kind of puts a capstone, if you will, on all of this horror, that indicating that although people may flee, they will not escape. They can take off and they could run, they could hit the road, but they were not going to escape. And so the Bible says, the blood that's already been spilled there at Dibon, there's going to be even more blood. And now they talk in the Bible, they call it Dimon. And so a lot of the scholars think, and even the early Christian writer Jerome said that Dibon and Dimon were the same city, and that this was a play on words with the calling it Dimon, which in Hebrew, blood is dam, D-A-M, and so Dimon, it's that play on words, that it was the city of blood, something like that. It's again, it's a Hebrew play on words, and it doesn't work in English. It's kind of like some of our things that people were talking about in the Torah Club yesterday about atonement is at one meant with God. Yeah, it works great in English, but it doesn't work in any other language. And so some of those catches that we hear about, it's fine. It works good in our own native language, but it doesn't work so well. It doesn't translate into another language very well. So Dibon, of course, was a very important and political religious center for Moab. And so it just makes sense that would be a target of the Assyrians when they came down. And they also talk about a lion. And some scholars say, well, that's a corruption of the language, but it's similar to some of the language that Amos used. It talks about fleeing a lion and meeting a bear. So we would say, I think the picture there, we would say is out of the frying pan and into the fire. You try to flee from one thing and you just end up in another mess that's just as equally dangerous for you. So the whole country would suffer devastation. Even though the people flee, they would not escape destruction. So going ahead into chapter 16 now. verse 1, send lambs to the ruler of the land from Selah in the desert to the mountain of the daughter of Zion. For like fluttering birds scattered from a nest, so the daughters of Moab be at the fords of Arnon. Give counsel, execute justice, cast your shadow like a night at noonday. Hide the refugees, do not betray the fugitive. Let my refugees stay with you. Be for Moab a hiding place from the face of the destroyer. So, here they're talking. There's quite a few interpretations of these verses here. Send a landlord's lamb suggests that sending of a tribute to an overlord, such as Mesha did for Omri of Israel. I mean, Omri had to send tribute back to Mesha because he was defeated, and that's an indication of submission. Moab was, I've talked about it, as an excellent sheep grazing country, and so it would be a logical tribute then for those seeking Judah's protection. They're talking about the let's see, getting back to that, where it talk about the daughter of Zion, the mountain of the daughter of Zion. Well, that's Jerusalem, okay? And so it would be logical then, if they're wanting something from Judah, then it would, what did they have? They had sheep. And so they would send those to Judah, and they're seeking protection. And we don't know. Selah is a place in Edom, and it's sometimes been associated with Petra, and that's the capital. It was the capital of Nabatea, which was another city-state area. But so it may be that the fugitives had escaped to Edom and that area down there around Petra, but then they still didn't feel like they were safe, and they wanted to be protected by Judah, figuring that Judah would be a better place. So they're sending their plea for help to the better stronghold, Mount Zion. Remember, Jerusalem had a reputation for not being it was secure. It could not be conquered. And of course, we know later on that that's not true. Now, so they talk about the fluttering birds. Well, that's also a picture of these people who were scattered. It's like well, it would be like going out here where we live and walking through the woods, and then you scare up a whole flock of doves. I did that just this morning, in fact. Just walking outside, and a bunch of doves flew out, and so there's a lot of stuff for the doves to eat around here. So I don't shoot them. And so we got lots of doves, but it's that kind of a deal where the birds will flutter away, and so these people now are fluttering out of danger, and so then the message, the verses 3 and 4 move into this request for refuge, and where it talks about counsel. Not so much advice as it is a plan of action. And so God is through Isaiah is telling Judah, give these people a shelter, that they need to be sheltered from the noonday sun. That's a figurative thing, because the sun, the noonday sun in the Middle East, can be very, very well, it can kill you. I mean, it's just so hot that You don't do a whole lot of heavy working in the right in the middle of the day in the Middle East, because temperatures can get up to very, very high, to the point of being dangerous. So when you give someone shelter, then that's you're sort of saving their life. And it also they talk about my fugitives. So God, through Isaiah, is talking about my fugitives. So he's kind of taking ownership of the Moabites. Again, they're the cousins of the Israelites, and so they have maybe not the full special favor of the Israelites, but they still are cousins. Their blood, and so God is giving them a break here. All right, comments or questions? All right, now we're going to get into our Messianic verses here that Rich brought out. For the extortion is at an end. Devastation ceases. Oppressors are gone from the land. A throne will be established in mercy, and one will sit on it in truth. In the tent of David, one who seeks justice and is ready for righteousness. All right, now, for those of us, Isaiah's putting he's putting words into the Moabite messengers, the ambassadors, the emissaries that had gone to Jerusalem. He's putting words in the Moabite messengers' mouth. They look forward to the day when the oppression that has driven the Moabites into the Hebrews' arms, that will be brought to an end by this idyllic ruler of the house of David. And because of his own attachment to mercy, faithfulness, justice, righteousness, oppression will not be able to coexist with him. All right, so he will offer this kind of security that will be more permanent than had ever been known before. Now, this vision here, obviously, to us, 2,000 years, 2,500, 3,000 years later, is it's clearly messianic. And so Isaiah recognizes that Moab's hope is identical with Judah's hope. Both of them wait for a king of Israel who will somehow embody all of those traits, which are in fact what? The character of God. And so here then is another way of expressing the truth that the Moab is representative of all the nations which will come up to the mountain of God to learn his ways, ways then that are wrapped up incarnated, I guess you'd say, in a person who is the true ruler of Israel. And so this is, what this does, it tells us that not only this Messiah is going to be for Israel, but by extension through Moab, that's a picture of how the Messiah is going to be. He's going to be the Savior. He's going to be the Messiah for all of the nations, for all of mankind. So, anybody want to add anything to that messianic thing? Does it say anything else to you other than what we've talked about there? How's your internet connection there, Rich? If you got something to say there, I know you struggle with internet where you're at.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head there.
Okay, good deal.
Yes, sir.
Good deal. All right, so let's go ahead then to verse 6, because we're almost out of time. We have heard of the pride of Moab. Very proud is he, of his haughtiness, his arrogance, his insolence, his dishonest boasting. Therefore, Moab will wail for Moab. Everyone will wail for the sweet cakes of Kir Hareset. You will moan, utterly stricken. For the fields of Heshbon have been withered, as well as the vine of Sibmah. The rulers of nations have trampled the choice clusters that reached as far as Jazer, and into the desert its branches spread out and crossed to the sea. So these whoops, I didn't put that out there. All right, these verses have often been taken as a response to verses 1 through 5 and their plea for refuge. Okay. And so if that's what that, it's a response to that, then that would be kind of a not so subtle mockery of the people of Moab who are just trying to survive, and they're trying to get some security, and so it's a mockery. They're no longer proud and overbearing. Now they're just kind of creeping in with their little cries for mercy, and that's one way of looking at that, I suppose. And it's also possible that the words that are not so much a direct response as they are a beginning of a larger reflection of the nature of human pride and glory, and that interpretation would it would take out some of that sting of mockery that sometimes seems inconsistent with the tone that Isaiah took toward the Moabites, because he was clearly rocked to his core by what he saw in the destruction of Moab. And so this dishonest boasting, if correctly translated, speaks of the foolishness of human pride, and that's one of Isaiah's favorite themes, is the foolishness of human pride. All the wealth and the abundance which formed the basis of Moab or any nation's claims to superiority can be stripped away in a single night. And we just look at just what today is Sunday. Look what happened last week, where we've had the second largest bank failure since the Great Depression. And it happened almost overnight. I mean, it was just 2 weeks ago. You had these financial gurus saying, yes, let's go ahead and invest in the Silicon Valley Bank, and you'll be all right. Everything is good, except that it wasn't. And now a lot of these high-tech firms are going to lose everything they've got because they put everything into this bank and it has failed them. And so, it's good to have savings. It's good to stock up and have some things in your larder. Down here where we live in hurricane country, it's always good to have things that you can eat that don't require refrigeration or things like that, things that you can cook on, whether you can cook with a solar oven or all those kind of things are good. And I'm not denigrating that at all, because we do it, we have it. But that's only a stopgap measure. It's not something that is going to keep you forever. And so the idea that a person can take care of themselves outside of God's protection, I think is kind of arrogant. And but Moab is going to wail. Everybody in Moab is going to wail. And and it talks about how that the foreign rulers have destroyed all of the livelihood, the grapes and the crops of Moab. It says, therefore I will weep bitterly for Jazer, for the vine of Sibmah. I will drench you out of my tears, drench you with my tears, O Heshbon and Elealeh. For on your summer and your harvest the battle cry has fallen. Gladness and joy are taken away from the fruitful field and the vineyards. No singing for joy, no happy shouting, no treading wine in the presses. I have made the shouting stop. Okay, what does this mean? Isaiah, well, God through Isaiah is again just weeping. They're sad for the destruction that's coming to Moab, but it's going to happen. God said it was going to happen, and so his emotions are real. They are genuine. It's not something that he's pretending to be sad for them. And Jeremiah was that kind of a guy too. He was called the weeping prophet. And they talk about here where the harvest, the summer harvest of the grapes, when they would get together with the grapes, they'd bring them into the presses, and these areas where they made the wine. They would get in there, and it was a big party. It was a real, just a celebration of the harvest, and people would get in there and they would stomp the grapes, and you'd have the juices run down, and they would start the process of fermentation and preservation of the harvest. And it was generally a time of a lot of fun, a lot of laughter. Families would get together, friends would get together. It was a party, along with the idea of the working too. And so at this point then, it's all stopped. Why? Because the destruction was so great. It destroyed their crops, destroyed their ability to even press the grapes and their olives and all the other things that they would have done. All right, so going ahead, said, therefore, my heart moans for Moab like a lyre, and my inward part for Kir-Heres. So it will be when Moab is weary upon the high place and comes to his sanctuary to pray, it will do him no good. Okay, so what are they talking about? It's kind of interesting. If you look at the King James Version, it says, the King James Version says, my bowels are in an uproar or something like that. You see your bowels. Well, yeah, in the Tree of Life version that we use is therefore my heart moans. Well, how often have you gotten into a situation where you're in a bad something is going on with people that you know or something, and it just kind of makes you sick to your stomach. Okay, that's kind of what they're talking about here, that things are so bad, you just don't feel like eating, you've lost your appetite. And so that's what it's talking about. So that's not a funny way of talking about it either way. Therefore my heart moans, or I'm just sick at my stomach for all of that is happening to Moab. And basically they're the same, sickening of mind and body. But then they talk about when Moab is weary upon the high place, they're going up to Dibon, up to the high place where it's the sanctuary of their god Chemosh. And it says you can go up there and you can pray and do whatever it is that you do, but it's not going to do you any good. Because why? Chemosh cannot save you. Chemosh is just a piece of stone or gold or silver, whatever it was. So not only is their pride and abundance futile, so is their religion, the dependence on the false god Chemosh. He cannot do anything. So Moab is left with nothing upon which to rely. And so it's also a message to Judah because Judah can look at this and say, whoa, this prophecy against Moab, they're going to be destroyed. Why should we then expect, to make an alliance with them, because they're going to be destroyed? And so if they can't help themselves, they certainly can't help us. So it needed to go back to the thought that if they wanted to be saved from destruction, Judah had to rely on God and not anyone else within the community of nations there. All right. So this is the word of Adonai spoke concerning Moab in the past, but now Adonai has spoken, saying, within 3 years, as with the years of a hired worker, the glory of Moab will be disgraced. For all his large population, the remnant will be very small and feeble. So the prophecy, what they're talking about, that what Moab had spoken about Moab in the past, this prophecy may have come to Isaiah previously with a hold on it. It says, okay, this is what's going to happen, but you're not to say anything about this yet. We saw similar things with Ezekiel, where God gave him a prophecy and said, nope, you just sit on it you're not going to say anything for 5 or 6 years. Yep. And so it could have been, and now he's given permission to go ahead and deliver it, because why? The timing was right. And so basically the countdown had become within 3 years, and Judah was counting it down because they could see what was happening. And Judah was Moab was on its way down. They knew within 3 years they would fail, and they did. The destruction was imminent. It was going to happen within that 3 years, and the end result of it was that only a small remnant of the population of Moab would survive at all. And so that is that's the oracle concerning Moab, and that finishes us off for this evening. Any comments or questions that you might have? Wow. Okay. Well, I will. Joe's.
Yes, one question on perspective. We talked about fulfilling the law and the prophets, and I thought that Northern Kingdom only used the first 5 books of for their Bible, and then the Southern Kingdom used all the law and the prophets. Can you reconcile this words of Isaiah with the general Hebrew and Jewish understanding of the Bible and the law and the prophets?
Well, I know that by the time that of Yeshua, okay, this is after all this, they'd come back from the Babylonian exile and so forth, and you have the Samaritans up there in the area that had been the northern tribes and so forth. That area, those people there did only they only read from the Torah, the first 5 books, and nothing else. Okay, the Sadducees, the political religious sect of the Sadducees, called the Tzaddikim, in Jerusalem at the time of Yeshua, they also clung only to sola scriptura, only the first 5 books of the Bible, and that's what they got everything from. All right. And so it was the rest of normative Judaism. Remember, there were about 22 in the time of Yeshua. There were about 22 separate identifiable sects of Judaism, in Israel. And so there were some of them that were very fundamentalist. The Sadducees, of course, only did the first 5 books, and so therefore there's not a real good reference to, say, resurrection. And so the Sadducees did not believe in a life after death at all. It's just this was as good as it gets, and so that gave them a different perspective on their on how they conducted things. So it was like, well, this is all we're going to get, so we better get what we can get now, because there won't be anything later on that we're working toward. Of course, Yeshua came along, and Yeshua was a Pharisee. His bent, the things that he talked about, they were more in line with the Pharisaical groups within Israel at the time. And so he had a different perspective. Of course, there was life after death. There was going to be a resurrection, because he said, I am the resurrection and the life. And so therefore, the prophets also pointed to the Messiah, and how that certainly with Isaiah, he talked about how he was going to be stricken and then raised, and so they believed in a resurrection. The prophets very definitely did. And then it was other groups later on that decided that they were not going to elevate the writings of the prophets to that of a canonical level, like the first 5 books of the Bible were. I don't know if that
that helps a lot. Thank you very much.
Okay, I didn't know if I actually answered the
Yes, you did.
the question. Okay,
Mhm.
all right. Yeah, that's thanks, Rich, for the kind words there. And yeah, it's you can draw a lot of good lessons from these old ancient stories about how we can't do it ourselves. We need to do it through Yeshua and our trust and faith in him. That's for sure. So, all right. All right. I think any other comments? I think we got some new folks. Denny, good to have you with us tonight. And Carl and Carmen, Joe, and Paul, and of course Rachel. You're a regular now, Rachel. And Randy's been with us. Rich, good to have you back. Sheila. Okay, we got a new one there. I don't know how you say that. Sunmai Rosenberg. I don't know how you say that first name. But you're new.
Yes, Sunny. Yeah.
Sunny. Okay.
Yes.
All right. And tell me a little bit about you. This is your first time tonight, right?
Yes, my friend just introduced. So I just clicked, but I didn't get email directly from you. But somehow she forwarded, so I just clicked. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So you are you here locally in Houston?
No. I'm in North Carolina.
North Carolina. Okay.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. Glad to have you. You're not the only one from North Carolina. I've got another couple of students here that are from North Carolina. So you're not the only one.
Okay. So you are meeting every Sunday or
Every Sunday night we're here online from 7 to 8, or 8 to 9 your time.
yeah, okay.
Well, good to have you with us.
Okay, thank you.
If you will, Sunmi, if you will send me an email, you got my email somewhere, right? If you'll send me an email, I'll put you on the distribution list so that you will get the outline ahead of time, and you'll you get information from us. Okay.
So you are studying Isaiah every Sunday now, or how does
Yes.
it?
Yeah, we will be studying Isaiah until we finish it out. Now, it's a long book, so it'll take us a while, but we're doing couple of maybe one chapter a week, but like tonight we did 2 chapters. Next week we'll do 2 chapters, And so we'll work on it. I figure we'll be done about sometime. Well, let's see. This is February. I mean March. We might be done by the August, September timeframe, maybe something like. And we'll start a new book at that point.
Oh, I see.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Again, welcome to the class tonight.